slot cutting table. This is gigantic contraption. This is the way I do it. Some people use a table saw. This is so accurate though, but this huge contraption just to cut a tiny little hairline cut. But it's amazing. It's accurate, consistent. There goes our dust collector. Fix that in a minute. This blade is about $240. And these templates are cheap. This one, here's a Gibson scale length, and you mount your fingerboard to it. I use super glue, just tiny dots. And I do it after I radius and taper it. And it has to be, as you can imagine, perfectly centered. And this is actually backwards, but this one will be your nut where the strings go over. But it's mounted in here, and each fret is cut that like snaps in that tiny little guide pin, and that is that. It does it really accurate, really straight. I use Dunnlop fret wire. This spool is $248. It's nickel silver Dunnlop. I know what it is. It's been around, I mean, probably since the 40s or earlier. Chances are the songs you grew up with, the musicians, bass players, and guitar players are playing on Dunnlop fret wire. It's a good, it isn't too hard, it isn't too bright, and it isn't too muddy or warm. It does have an effect on the sound, but it's expensive, but worth every penny. This is amazing fret wire. Not everybody uses it anymore, but some of the high-end Gibsons and whatnot. And yeah, I baby that roll. Okay, so I have this all radiused, and we're gonna use, set it up here, the fender scale length, 25.5. 25.5 inches. That's the common length. And I have a center line scribed, a center line here. I recommend these, you know, as a carpenter, so many times, you know, even some of the best carpenters I've worked with, finished carpenters, that's good enough. Or you eyeball things here and there. You can't do that anymore. You almost have to be like, you know, you're working with wood. You know, and like this is already starting to bow. That'll be fixed. This isn't twisting or cupping that way is really, really bad. But you know, these have to be dead on. They have to be perfect. They have to be accurate. The intonation when you're done has to be perfect, in line with the piano, the horn, whatever you're playing with. Everything has to be perfect. I do the inlays now afterwards, and knock it down with the radius block and give it the fingernail sanding. It's the same radius as my necks, in this case 16 inches. 16-inch radius. I love that radius. It's so comfortable. Fenders are actually a 12-inch. You hear people say, oh, it has a baseball bat neck. And even just doing simple scales, it's like being on a stair climber, to me anyway. But a 16-inch radius is awesome. You could take the actions really, really low. You could bend a string without it fretting out. Okay, we got our fingerboard clamped, and yep, I just use about 7 dots across the length right in the middle of super glue. That's the way to do it. And then, you know, these templates are really expensive. They're like 80 bucks a piece, but they're stainless steel. They're really thick and extremely accurate. Made by StewMac. I mean, I have 5 of them now for bass guitars, Gibson lengths, baritones. You just have to bite it. You know, another thing is dust collection. There's so many tools I don't have. I don't have a planer. I can't run my boards through a plane. I have to do it by hand. I don't have a spindle sander. But, you know, I had to bite it and buy a dust collection system, and just had to do it. I mean, you have to do it. But this is a sample of the fret And I don't know if you could see that or not, but this simple little pocket gauge, I use it because this will actually, it's thin enough to fit down into the slot and measure exactly how deep I'm going. And I leave just a tiny bit of daylight through there. And the reason being, you know, wood expands, contracts. You might have an acoustic guitar out by the campfire, whatever the case may be, and you don't want the frets popping out. The void is filled, I do fill with super glue. It isn't necessarily to hold the frets in. They have these little barbs and they wedge into the fret slots, but I like fill in all the voids, and in these slots in the neck is literally open grain and moisture could seep in. It just, you know, a 40-year fret. And then, okay, so our super glue, crazy glue, whatever you want to call it, whatever part of the country you're in. Imagine set up, and we'll be ready to roll. Afterwards, this being stainless steel, it's brushed stainless, so it has just enough bite for the glue to hold it. A lot of people use double-sided tape, and man, it just makes a mess. It leaves gum and residue and fills the pores where you're gonna glue it anyway. Before we get started, I take a razor blade and make sure there is absolutely no, and I'll take unplug my dust collection and vacuum it up, but we don't want any foreign debris, some little pieces of dust in there. We don't want any of that. We want this dead on perfect. And it's pretty clean, but what you're hearing right now is just the dust collection. It's a little loud. This guy is surprisingly quiet and smooth. I guesstimated the depth, and I'm going to make a first cut and then check the depth. Okay, all our slots are cut. People that don't know, Fender guitars have a thin nut. The bone will go here, and then this scallops literally scallop into the face of the headstock, and that's why I left this blank. It'll round in all graceful, and that gets done after this is glued on. But there might be some machinists out there cringing because I run the blade through and then back out. Normally I would not do that. If I was machining an engine part that had to be accurate, I would not do that. I would do my cut, lift the bit away, come back, and then start over. But this thing is so heavy, and the cast iron, it's just a really, really heavy machine, and it just does a really nice job. And let's see, let's get our gauge. I'm gonna double check it, checked in the beginning. But yeah, our gaps, they're just perfect. And they're gonna be a little heavier in the middle because of the circumference of the 16-inch radius. And it almost doesn't look like much of a radius, but it's there and it's accurate. And it's dead on. I used to have to do these radiuses by hand. And I spent 2 days getting a fingerboard right. We got our slats all cut. I want to remove this from the stainless guide. I don't want to clamp on this guy and run any risk of distorting it. These things are like $80. They're expensive, but we got another one over here. I hang them off the side of the table here. So I'm just going to clamp this to the table. Nice and firm. That up against there. And take a stout block of wood. Nice hardwood. And give it a shrill hit. And there we go. So this will clean up. This little bit of super glue. This is a razor blade for next time, and a little steel wool like it was never there. Same with this. I don't want this influencing. It is where the truss rod goes, but I don't want it influencing anything, and I want the wood glue to soak in there and hold and help bind it. And there was a little bit of texture from the resaw. I do saw these from solid boards, and basically saw down through the middle. My bandsaw is pretty darn accurate, but I could saw it down the middle and then start doing my tapers, and that's how I do them. This wood is getting really outrageous expensive along with everything, but so we've gotten to this point. Now we could press our frets in.